The door creaked open again just after sunrise. I didn't need to look. I already knew it was Saul. Every morning, same time, same rhythm in his footsteps. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee halfway brewed, slippers still warm, and watched him through the window. He stood on the porch with his walking stick already turned toward the trees, like they were calling his name. "Don't follow me," he said, without turning around. I stood up anyway, one hand resting against the frame of the door. "Where do you go every morning, Saul?" He hesitated just a moment, then said with a half smile, "Just walking. Helps my lungs." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But Saul had never been one to wander. For most of our years together, he was the one who stayed close, who noticed when a bird built a nest too close to the gutter or when the wind lifted the edge of the shed roof. These past 3 months, though, he changed. Quietly, gently, but something had shifted. He left at sunrise and came home by dusk, dusty, tired. Sometimes with a limp he tried to hide. He wouldn't talk about it, and I stopped asking, at least out loud. That evening, I took his coat from the hook. He'd left it there as usual, folded with more care than usual. I checked the pockets not out of suspicion, just impulse. In the right pocket, I found a few crumbles of earth still damp and a single crushed stem that smelled faintly of wild mint and something older. Something like roots. I held the coat close for a moment, then hung it back up. The next morning, I heard the door again. The soft thud of his boots on the porch. Another day, another walk, another silence stretching between us. But this time, I waited until he was out of sight. Then I looked at the woods. Really looked. Something was pulling him in, and I wasn't sure I wanted to find out what. Not yet. I first noticed the drawer on a Tuesday. Saul's old oak desk sat in the corner of the living room, the same place it had been for decades, its surface worn smooth where his forearms used to rest while he paid bills or wrote grocery lists. He'd never been a man of secrets. Half the time, he forgot to close drawers, let alone lock them. But that morning, when I tried to tidy a stack of envelopes, the top drawer refused to open. A keyhole, one I'd never seen used, stared back at me. I pressed my fingertips against the metal, testing it lightly, then let my hand fall away. The gesture felt too much like prying, and I wasn't ready to become someone who pried. Not with him. That evening, while we washed dishes together, I tried a different approach. "Our anniversary's next month," I said casually, rinsing a plate. "Maybe we could drive out to the ridge and watch the sunset like we used to." Saul paused mid-wipe. Just a heartbeat, but enough for me to feel it. Then he coughed too sharply to seem natural and said, "Let's not plan too far ahead." The words landed heavy. I dried my hands slowly, hoping he'd look at me, offer something more, anything to dilute the ache spreading across my chest. But he didn't. He finished the last dish, set it gently in the rack, and said he was turning in early. That night, sleep came in fragments. I dreamed of him walking into the trees, the branches closing behind him, like a curtain. I called his name, but the woods swallowed the sound. In the dream, I ran after him and never caught up. When I woke, the house was bright with late morning light. The clock read nearly 10. Saul should have been home hours ago. His boots were gone from the mat. The thermos he always carried was missing too. I stood at the window watching the line where our yard met the forest and felt the same pull I'd felt days before, the urge to follow whatever path he kept choosing over me. Saul was already in the kitchen when I came down. The scent of coffee greeted me before the creak of the stairs even settled. It had been weeks since he'd woken before me. Months, maybe, since he made breakfast without prompting. He was moving slower than usual. But there was a softness to it, like every gesture meant something. He sliced the bread, carefully toasted it just right, then spread the butter all the way to the corners, just how I liked it. When he handed me the plate, he tucked a folded napkin into my hand. "You'll understand soon," he said. There was a warmth in his voice I hadn't heard in some time. Not cheerful exactly. Just sure. I held the napkin for a second, feeling the small crease in the center, but didn't open it. I just nodded, because something in me didn't want to break whatever stillness he was preserving. He kissed the top of my head like he used to when we were young, then picked up his coat and walking stick. The thermos was already filled. The door shut gently behind him. I finished the toast alone. When noon came and he hadn't returned, I told myself maybe he'd just taken a longer route. Maybe he'd sat down to rest and lost track of time. When 2 o'clock passed, I drove the truck to the edge of the property and started walking the trail myself. They found him by the creek, tucked near the bend where the moss grows thick. His hat was in his lap, his back against the roots of a leaning pine. His eyes closed like he was simply napping. The doctor said it was quick. His heart had given out. Just stopped. No struggle. No pain. I didn't cry. Not then. I sat on the porch while the sun lowered behind the ridge and stared at the trees that had swallowed him whole for 3 months, wondering what they knew, what they kept from me. The days after Saul's funeral melted into each other. People came and went. Some I knew, some I didn't. They brought casseroles, cards, gentle hands on my shoulder. They spoke in quiet voices as if grief needed silence to breathe. I said, "Thank you," each time, though half the names slipped out of my mind as soon as I heard them. I slept in fits, ate only when reminded by the ticking of the clock. The house felt hollow, not just from the absence of him, but from the absence of movement. His footsteps, his coughing, the soft clink of his mug against the sink. I tried not to think about the drawer still locked in the corner of the living room. It could wait. Everything could wait now. It was on the 5th morning, maybe the 6th, I saw it. A small bird not much larger than my palm perched on the edge of the back fence. Its wing was tipped in black, a detail so striking. It stopped me mid-sip of lukewarm coffee. It didn't flinch when I stepped closer to the window. It didn't fly away. It looked at me. Then it chirped. Not loud, but clear. Certain. Once. Then again. I opened the door, letting it swing half shut behind me. The bird tilted its head, then flitted off the fence toward the trees, stopping just before the line where our yard met the woods. It turned back, chirped again. I stood there for a breath. Maybe 2. Then I followed. Each step into the forest felt like stepping into something unfinished. The scent of damp leaves clung to the air. The light filtered through like it always had, but everything felt shifted, charged. The bird moved ahead, not far, always stopping just long enough for me to catch up. There was no path, not really. Just a sense that this way, this direction was the one he'd taken. And somewhere in the rhythm of that little bird's wings in the hush of pine needles underfoot, I felt something loosen in my chest as I pressed deeper into the trees. The ground wasn't paved with intent, but it held traces. A patch of leaves darker than the rest, a line of grass flattened just barely. I wouldn't have noticed it a week ago. But now, with each step behind that little black-tipped bird, I saw them the faint fingerprints of someone who had passed through this place again and again. I walked slowly, careful not to disturb the hush that lived here. Moss brushed the edges of my shoes. Roots twisted just beneath the surface like veins beneath skin. The bird flew ahead again, stopping just long enough for me to know I hadn't lost it. I passed a rough cluster of stones half buried. A few wildflowers poked through the underbrush, early blooms survivors of late spring frost. A fallen log stretched across the way, its bark half rotted and softened with age. I climbed over it without thinking, letting my hand trail along its side. The air was rich with the scent of damp soil and something else, something clean and familiar. Then, almost without warning, the trees opened up. The clearing wasn't large, but the light made it feel endless. The sun came through as if it had been waiting, and below all around me were daisies, white and bright, swaying just slightly in the breeze. Dozens at first, then hundreds, a sea of petals stretching out like a quiet celebration. I took a step forward, breath caught somewhere between joy and ache. In the center of the field, where the flowers bent just enough to make room, sat a wooden box. Old, but not forgotten, smoothed at the edges from years of use or care. My name, Tilda, was carved gently across the lid, not printed, not etched, carved by hand. I stood there for a long time, not reaching for it, yet not ready to open whatever waited inside. Because in that moment, the truth wasn't what was inside the box. It was what surrounded it, what he had grown for me in silence, one bloom at a time. I knelt beside the box, brushing a few stray petals off the lid with trembling fingers. The wood was warm from the sun, smooth in places, and rough in others, like something handmade with love, not precision. I lifted the lid slowly, almost afraid of what waited inside. A sealed envelope with my name written in Saul's handwriting, steady but faint. A photograph yellowed just at the edges, us standing on a ridge in the Smokies, the year he first took me hiking. I had a bandana tied around my hair, and he had a daisy tucked behind one ear, smiling like he knew a joke I hadn't heard yet. And there it was, the necklace I thought I'd lost 30 years ago. A small silver locket, scratched from time, but still intact. I hadn't seen it in decades. I thought it had slipped down a drain or gotten caught in a bedsheet at some hotel, but he'd had it all along. I opened the letter last. The paper shook in my hands, but his words were steady. He wrote that he'd known for a while that his time was ending. The doctors had confirmed it, but he hadn't needed them to tell him. His body had spoken louder. The lungs, the fatigue, the aching silence that settled in his bones. He said he couldn't fix what time had taken from us, couldn't undo the wear or stop the ache of losing, but he could give me something that would stay, something real. Daisies, he said, were the first flowers he ever gave me. At a gas station after our first fight when all the stores were closed. I'd laughed, then said they were my favorite. And he never forgot. I planted one for each morning I had left, he wrote. If I told you, you would have tried to help, but I wanted it to be yours, only yours. I folded the letter with care and pressed it to my chest. Around me, the field swayed in silence, and nestled in the bottom of the box beneath a curl of ribbon, something small caught the light. It was almost hidden, buried beneath a few curled leaves, and a pale ribbon I nearly mistook for nothing. But when I lifted the ribbon, the brass caught the light. A key, old, slightly tarnished, with the kind of familiar weight that made my fingers close around it before my mind even caught up. I turned it over in my palm. No tag, no note, but I didn't need one. I knew exactly where it belonged. The walk back felt different. The woods didn't feel like they were holding something anymore. They just felt quiet, grieving in their own way. At home, the living room looked untouched, his boots still by the mat, his desk still neat. I sat down slowly, pressing the key into the lock I hadn't dared test before. It clicked easily, almost softly, like it had been waiting. Inside was a single sketchbook. I opened it carefully, afraid the pages might crumble from time, but they were solid, marked with graphite and smudges and little fingerprints of effort. The first few pages were outlines, rough drawings of the meadow mapped in stages. A bare clearing. A few dots where flowers might go. Notes in the corners. Too rocky clear this patch. Try again with the soil here. She likes full sun. And on one page, circled in faint pencil, just 3 words. Tilda's spot. I don't know how long I sat there turning each page like it held part of him. Because it did. Every line, every mistake, every retry. He had come here each morning not just to walk, not just to be alone, but to create something for me, knowing he wouldn't be here to see me find it. I pressed my hand to my mouth. My breath shook. And for the first time since he left, I let myself cry. Not from confusion, not even from pain, from the overwhelming truth of being known. Fully. Quietly. Constantly. The next morning, when I returned to the clearing, the flowers were just starting to catch the light. Spring came slowly, as it always does in these hills. The frost lifted a little later than expected, and the bird song grew louder each morning. His daisies came back stronger than I imagined they would. They grew without neat lines now. Wilder. Freer. He'd started something, but the earth had taken over, adding its own rhythm to what he left behind. I didn't try to control it. I just tended. Pulled the weeds gently. Picked off broken stems. Sometimes I watered, though the rain usually came just in time. I visited the meadow most days. At first, I thought I was just keeping it up for him. But I came to realize I was doing it for myself, too. I spoke out loud there words I didn't say to anyone else. Sometimes to him. Sometimes to no one in particular. There was something about the light, the quiet, the way the petals turned upward in the breeze that made silence feel less lonely. Neighbors began to notice. A few asked where I disappeared to each afternoon. Just somewhere peaceful, I said. They nodded, respectful. They didn't ask more. One afternoon, I was kneeling near the edge of the field clearing leaves from a small patch of new growth when I heard soft footsteps behind me. I turned to see a little girl from the house across the road. She was maybe 7, her shoes muddy, and her braid unraveling. "Hi," she said, eyes wide at the sea of white blossoms. I stood, brushing dirt from my knees. "Does your mom know you're out here?" She nodded, then hesitated. "I saw you walk here. I wanted to see where you went." I looked at the meadow, then at her. She reminded me of myself at that age, curious, quiet, a little too brave. "It's a special place," I said gently. "It means a lot to me." Her eyes stayed on the flowers. "It's pretty." "It is," I said. Then after a pause, I added, "But it's not just mine anymore." The next morning, there were 2 sets of footprints along the edge of the trail. The sky broke open in the early hours, a low rumble rolling through the valley like a warning. I stood at the kitchen sink watching the clouds swell darker, heavier, until the first drops splattered against the glass. Then came the wind, then the sheets of rain. Without thinking, I grabbed my coat and boots. The trail was slick, the earth soft beneath my steps. My breath came fast, heart racing as I moved through the trees. Part of me knew it was irrational. Daisies had weathered storms before. But this meadow, his meadow had become something more than a patch of flowers. By the time I reached the clearing, my clothes were soaked through. The bird wasn't there today, just the sound of water, falling through branches, and the thick quiet of wet earth breathing. I braced myself, but they were still there. The daisies bent low under the weight of the rain. Petals drooped. Stems leaned. But none had broken. None had washed away. They held on. I walked to the center and knelt, my knees sinking into the mud hands pressed flat to the ground. It was cold, but not lifeless. The soil pulsed with something steady, something sure. And in that moment, I didn't feel the loss. I felt him, in the curve of the stems, in the stubbornness of those roots, in the quiet resilience of a patch of wildflowers surviving the storm. I closed my eyes and let the rain run down my face. Not crying, just letting it fall. "I'm still here," I whispered. The trees didn't answer, but I didn't need them to. And when I opened my eyes again, the clouds were already beginning to break. A soft breeze moved through the meadow, lifting the petals gently, as though shaking off the memory of wind. The sun followed slowly behind. The months passed in their own rhythm, slow and steady. The kind that didn't ask anything of you, just offered space. The kind that healed more in silence than in motion. I learned how to make just one cup of coffee again, but I still set the second mug out sometimes just for a moment. Just to remember, the meadow never stopped blooming. Each season brought its own color, its own shift, but the daisies stayed returning, like clockwork, stubborn and soft. Some afternoons I'd see others walk the trail. Neighbors, visitors, the curious. Some came with cameras, some with notebooks, a few with tears. I never stopped them. It was never really mine to begin with. Still, there's one day I keep. Every year before the sun rises, I pack a thermos and an old blanket. I walk the trail the same way he must have walked it, slowly, counting steps, feeling the hush of the trees around me. I wait until the sky softens from black to blue, until the first light spills over the treetops. And then I kneel in the center of the field, in the exact spot marked with my name, and I whisper what I've whispered every year since the first bloom opened without him. Thank you for loving me, without words. The meadow never answers, but the breeze always shifts then, just slightly, and I let it move through me. Some loves aren't loud. They don't announce themselves. They don't ask for praise or parade through rooms. Some loves just plant flowers in the woods and leave keys behind. And those loves, quiet, steadfast, rooted, don't vanish when the person does. They grow, they remain, and they wait for you every morning like the first light through the trees.